We're starting Ezra Hashem Siman Samach Zion in Vayoel Moshe, and it's a continuation of the last Siman. He was talking about that the Rambam and the Gemara at the end of Kesubah say that fruits are going to be plentiful. The Rambam says fruits are going to be plentiful with Moshe Mashiach. The Gemara says it was plentiful in the time of Bayesheni. The fruits were gigantic, and the Eretz Yisrael had a big bracha. So the Rambam is saying that's going to happen Bizman Mashiach. So Al Pi Divrei Hashas ve'Rambam, according to the Gemara and the Rambam Hanal that we mentioned, Shebi Moshe Mashiach Yachzor Bracha B'Peiros. The Rambam says that in the time of Mashiach, the Peiros is going to come, the bracha, this blessing, this greatness is going to come back into the fruit. The Peiros Eretz Yisrael can be kedem like it was originally. It's even going to be a greater blessing. Shiur Mitsuyin can offer. They're going to be so plentiful like the dirt. So Efshal Loimar Oid, Efshal Taretz Oid. We could answer up again a different teretz. Divrei Rambam Hanal, the words of the Rambam Sheiksheisi Lama Hishmi Datnai. Shebemishta Perakei Meiser Sheni. Now this is a little. You have to chazer a little what we learned in the earlier Siman. I think it was Nun Vav, Nun Zayin. He brought down that there's a Mishnah Meiser Sheni, right? It said that originally there was a takana that Rabbanan made that you have to bring up the fruits of Kerem Revai, the fruits that are the fourth year of the Kerem, to Yerushalayim when you're within 1 day's journey, and then Misharabu Peiros, when there were too many fruits in Yerushalayim, they were Mavatal Takana. Okay, and then Rabbi Yosi, that's the Tanakama, and Rabbi Yosi said that no, that until the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they had this takana. Once it was destroyed, they didn't want fruit in Yerushalayim anymore, then they were Mavatal Takana. So the problem was, and then the Gemara, the Mishnah says there in Ma'aseh Sheni that when Mashiach comes, or not when Mashiach comes, it says when there was a Tanai, that when things change back, Yachzor Adavar L'Kamei Shahaya, the takana will pop back up again by itself. They didn't want to rely on Bezdin making it come back, so they just made like a Tanai that the takana should come back by itself. So the problem was a twofold problem in the Rambam. The Rambam doesn't mention this Tanai. And also he paskins like Rabbi Yosi, which is against the Tanakam, against the Rabbanan. So he's pasking like a minority opinion here. Usually the Rambam would go with the Rabbin.
But the Stam Mishnah is always a Rabbanan.
Yeah, the Stam Mishnah usually, unless you could prove that.
The Gemara asks, who is this Tana, etc. Who is this Stam Mishnah at times?
Yeah, in the Chanami, the Gemara could sometimes ask that. But otherwise, you assume that the Tana Kama is the Rabbanan. So why did the Rambam paskin like Rabbi Yosi? Okay, so these are the two questions he mentions here. Lama Hishmin at Tanai. Why did the Rambam leave out the Tanai? Why doesn't he tell us that the Takana could come back by itself? And Gamli Yashev, to answer up as well the other question, Mashan is Kasha HaToisvis Yomtiv. The question the Toisvis Yomtiv poses on the Rambam, Lala Pasuk Rabbi Yosi v'loy Tanakama. Why does he paskin like the minority opinion? Shekasav al Zev v'loy Nehira v'loy Marda Rambam Kasav. The Toisvis Yomtiv says you can't answer me that the Rambam just did it because there's no nafkamina anyway. Take a look. The Rambam Kasav Mishachar Beis Hamikdash Mishum de Af L'Tanakama Hoil V'Nechra V'Bayis Ein Ma'alin. That nowadays there's anyway no nafkamina, because now what happened? The Peiros increased, right? So the Tanakam would hold that the din was bottled for let's say a certain number of years before the Churban. But then the Churban happened, so Rabbi Yosi also holds the din is bottled. So since the din is anyway bottled, the Rambam didn't have to bring down the Rabbanan's reason because it doesn't make a difference. Okay? Since the Beis Hamikdash anyway destroyed, ein malin, because it cost it b'pirushay. So the Toisvis Yomtiv says no. The ein zeh miderech Rambam. Can't answer that because the Rambam's derech is not lahashmit b'chibur aydin anoy b'fnei abayis. The Rambam doesn't leave out things that are in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. He brings everything. It would be the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch only brings things that are negay to us, but the Rambam brings everything. So why did the Rambam leave out this din of the Rabbanan that was noy b'zman abayis? All right. So now, previously, I think it was in Siman Samach, the answer to this kasha was that the Rabbi said that the Beis Hamikdash could only get built when Mashiach comes, because even though there was a havamina to build it in the time of Rabbi Yeshua, that was only because at that time they still knew how to build it. They still had a Messiah. But once the Messiah was lost, there's no way we could build the Beis Hamikdash until Mashiach comes. So according to that, that's why the Rambam didn't have to bring the Tanai. The Tanai was said for the times when we could build the Beis Hamikdash, right? Even without Mashiach. Then we need that Tanai. But once we have to wait for Mashiach anyway, Mashiach and Eliyahu and everyone who's going to get up from Tchias Mesim at that time are all going to be big Talmidei Chachamim, and they'll be able to put the Takana back themselves. We don't need the Tanai. Okay, that was the old teretz. Now he's going to say a new teretz. Okay? He says, "Dihine kvar kosavti le'el." I already wrote, "Shema shehevi Rambam kol adinim anoigim b'vnei habayis, hu b'shvil sheyesh b'hem nafkamina losi." That the Rambam doesn't just tell us history about what happened during the Beis Hamikdash. He only tells it to us if it's going to be nogeya to the future. V'hinei b'ridvaz sham, the Ridvaz, Rabbi Yaakov David Wolovsky from Slutsk, on the side of the Yerushalmi. Hevi mitamidei Gra, he quotes the students of the Gra, Shapirshu divrei Yerushalmi, that they explain the Yerushalmi, that it says like this: Zoisoi Meres, Malchus Beis David, Binyan Beis Hamikdash Kodemus the Malchus Beis David. From this Mishnah you see that the Beis Hamikdash will be built before Mashiach comes, and then the Yerushalmi ends off Dichsiv v'damein av tishtechamer. It says v'hachsiv, but he learns v'hachsiv is like a raya. It's not a kasha. Okay, v'hachsiv v'damein av tishtechamer, that you'll drink the blood of the grapes, which means there'll be a lot of fruits. And v'imkein yu anavim merubos, there'll be a lot of grapes. V'lamat tzarich az hatakana. Why will you need, when Mashiach comes? Why will you need a takana? La'ater shlaki Yerushalayim b'peiros. Why you need that takana for? You have already lots of peiros. El Vadai, the Beis Hamikdash, Kodim the Malchus Beis David, that the Yerushalmi is worried, the Mishnah really is worried, that the Beis Hamikdash might get built before, and then there'll be Yu Anavim Me'utim, Yu and Sham, there'll be only a few grapes, and that's why we need the takana. So he's saying that that's the Yerushalmi's raya, that the Beis Hamikdash could be built before. But what we're taking out of this is that when Mashiach does come, then there'll be a lot of pairs. So the Yerushalmi is saying that Beis Hamikdash could have been built before. That was only like during Rabbi Shua's time, when they still had a Messiah. But after the Messiah was lost, we can't do it till Mashiach comes. Right. So he's saying that the takana, the takana would come back by itself. That was only necessary for a time when they could build the Beis Hamikdash. But when the Beis Hamikdash is going to get built when Mashiach comes, we don't need it because we have lots of fruits. The Bavli
only did the approach, which are halach l'maisa.
Okay, but what he said in Siman Samach was that the Bavli is talking later, so the Bavli knows that there's no possibility of building it. Anyway, the Chazinim Bazeh, we see from this Daitam that the Talmidei Gra hold after Bias HaMashiach, Shiyeh Riboy HaPeris. After when Mashiach comes, there's going to be lots of fruit, so ain't Makom L'Takanazu. You're not going to need this rule of bringing up the fruit to Yerushalayim. Shehu avur mila pairs, because the whole takana was only made because in Yerushalayim they have a lack of fruit. But in the Mashiach's time, there's going to be lots of fruits. So therefore, we're going to use this fact to answer up the Rambam too. The Rambam holds that we don't have a Messiah today how to build it. That was the Rambam Beis Bechira at the beginning. Perek Aleph, I think he says that Binyan Yechezkel, we don't know Pshat, right? What Binyan Yechezkel is. So Kasher Evesi L'mayla. V'gam Kasav Sha'az Yiu Madani Mitzuyim Ka'offer. And the Rambam himself says in Melachim that we brought in the last Siman that in the times of Mashiach there'll be plentiful fruits like the dust of the earth. So in Cain, Shaper Yuchalio Shapoiste Katana Kama. It could be that really the Rambam Paskins like the first Tana, like the Rabbim. Shahatanai Hu Bishvil Mida Peiris. That the Tanai has to do with the fruits. Umash cost of din zeh ali achar churban. The reason why the Rambam says that the din is after the churban, which sounds like Rabbi Yossi, is bishvil shegam Tanakama moed lezeh. Because even the Tanakama really agrees nowadays that you don't need the takana because the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed and there's no point in bringing up the peiros to Yerushalayim. Elamai, when the Beis Hamikdash gets built, you're going to want to bring the peiros to Yerushalayim, but then there's going to be lots of fruit. So no matter what, you're covered. Okay. The Pirsha Mishnah for the Rambam says that even the Tanakam is moed bizman hazeh. There's no point in talking about the takana in the time of the future Beis Hamikdash Kitama Tanai Ladasa Tanakama who be totally b'miyad Paris. The whole reason is because there wasn't enough fruit. Shahaya Azmetzias said that there was a possibility that it could be that during temple times there will be not enough fruit. Aval Abai is still asid, but the future based in Mikdash Shia Achabi is a Mashiach. So then for sure there won't be a lack of fruit. There's no nafkamina. There's no more nafkamina to talk about Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan and the T'nai. So therefore, the Rambam didn't bring down the T'nai. Okay? And then he says, Gam b'lavachi. Anyway, we could say like the teretz that I said in Siman Samach, which is Ef Shalom l'das Rambam shalafi das Tanakama haya T'nai al zman. What does that say? Bayis Sheni. The Tanai was in the time of Bayis Sheni. Shahaya efshar shiyah achreim dor she'enam gedolim krishonim. That the Rabbanan hold the Tanai was when the fruits decrease again. Yeah, then they'll have to bring up the Peiros to Yerushalayim. When could that be? In the time of Bayis Sheni. The fruits might decrease because then the door might not be so great enough to make the takana. So they made it a self takana that comes back by itself. But nowadays that we're after the Churban and we're waiting for Mashiach, so there's no way the Beis Hamikdash could come back until Mashiach. And that generation will be greater, and they'll be able to put the takana themselves. So ein tzorech l'shum t'nai. You don't need a t'nai. That the Bezdin of Mashiach could do it themselves. That's the old text that he said in Siman Samach.